I want to tell you about one of the most powerful and dramatic stories in the Bible. This is a story that happened through Jesus, and it was captured by his disciple John. This is the story of Lazarus. So I think of this verse where the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." And I think of how this is a picture of our world right now. I think of the people on their knees in different countries, in different cultures, reaching out to God as coronavirus is spread around the world, looking to heaven, looking for an answer, sending word to God in heaven, "Lord, the one you love is sick." This story, it's a picture for us of getting an understanding of how Jesus responds to our illness, how Jesus responds to the things that we have to suffer in this world. Lazarus was a friend of Jesus, a close friend, but he'd been ill and things were getting worse. The sisters of Lazarus, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus. They would have known the weight that was on Jesus' shoulders. They would have known all the ministry that he was doing, and they wouldn't have wanted to bother him until the very last moment. But things had got so grave, things were looking so bleak, that they had to send word to their friend Jesus, that to look for him for salvation, healing, and hope. For Jesus to answer the call of Mary and Martha, it was going to take a massive risk. To go back to Bethany, to go back to this area, is going to be a massive risk for Jesus and the disciples. And as Jesus makes the decision that they're going to answer the call of Mary and Martha, the disciples begin to question him. "Jesus, they tried to stone us last time we were in that area." In fact, what happens in just the chapter before, in John chapter 10, is that they tried to make a desperate grab for Jesus because they're so angry with him, because he was claiming to be the Son of God. So they picked up stones in their hands and were wanting to kill him. So for Jesus to answer this call, it meant that he was going to risk his own life. It meant he was going to risk the life of the disciples. Such was the anger and hatred against Jesus. It reminds me of the risk that we all have to take sometimes. We're already talking so much, aren't we, in our world about the risks that we take every time we go to the supermarket and we use a shopping trolley. Every time that we go even into a church might be a perceived risk for so many of us. But there are some risks that are worth taking. There are some risks that we have to take. And this is what I see through the story of Jesus. We kind of see this even with what's been happening in our world in just these last months, when we've had the lockdown happening around the world, everyone was shut inside their homes. And then when we saw the killing of George Floyd, protesters took to the streets. We saw thousands of people, after not seeing people congregated in any groups of more than 5 or 10 after months. But all of a sudden, thousands of people filled our streets. Why? So some risks are worth taking. Some risks are worth embracing because there's too much at stake for us on the other side of those risks. But as we come back to the story of Lazarus, if we've got any doubt about how dangerous this would have been for Jesus, we only have to look in verse 16, where we find that Thomas says and declares to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go so that we may die with him." This is Thomas, who's known famously for being doubting Thomas. But here he shows incredible courage as he declares this to be a suicide mission, to be something that they're going to die for if they're going to go to help Lazarus. And so this gives us an insight into the risk that Jesus and the disciples were taking. So they set off from where they are and they make the journey towards Bethany. As Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, it meant that many Jews from the area, family members, community, had travelled to come and mourn with Mary and Martha. This was a tragedy. And Jewish custom was that the whole village would have been mourning together. There would have been wailing, and it would have been an emotional and upsetting scene. Then Jesus enters the picture. We have two sisters and two different responses. One hears about Jesus and goes where he is at. One decides to stay at home. Stay at home. Those are the words of our season, aren't they? Stay at home. And this is exactly what Mary decides to do as she stays at home. Imagine knowing that Jesus was so near. Imagine if he was physically somewhere close to you right now. Wouldn't you do anything to be where he is? I think you take any risk. You go and pursue his presence. And there's something about our lives as we draw near to him, he draws near to us. That as we go towards Jesus, that he comes close to us. That's a promise in the book of James. And I want to say to you today, what are you doing to draw near to Jesus? Are you staying at home, or are you pursuing him? Are you coming towards him? Are you coming towards your church? Because we know that Jesus is the head of the church. So how are you coming towards Jesus? How are you coming towards your church? And leaving the safety of our homes, it's not just about the physical nature of our homes. We know that we've got parameters and safety restrictions around the world. It's about the mentality that we have as we come towards Jesus. Jesus made a promise. Your brother will rise again. And then as Martha responds and says, I know that he'll rise again one day, Jesus says, no, I am the resurrection. It's not just some far off event. It's not just something in the distant future. It's standing right in front of you. I am the resurrection and the life. Then Jesus talks about life after death, and then he presents her with a simple question. Do you believe this? Not do you understand this? Do you comprehend what I'm trying to say? He says, do you believe this? Do you believe in me? Jesus isn't looking for your understanding. We're obsessed with trying to work everything out. We're doing our calculations and our measurements. But what Jesus is saying is, do you believe in me? He sweeps away all of our questions, all of our doubts, all of the things that we don't understand. And he says, look at me, believe in me. Instead of trying to figure it all out, come and trust me. Put your faith in me. And church, that's what he's wanting to say to you today. Don't try and figure everything out, but believe with all that you are. This beautiful thing called faith. As Jesus asks the question, do you believe this? Martha affirms her faith in Jesus and declares that he is the Messiah. Jesus then asks after her sister Mary, wondering where she is. So Martha goes and fetches Mary and brings her back to Jesus, and they have a conversation. What Mary said to Jesus is the exact same thing that Martha said to Jesus when she saw him too. If you'd been here, this wouldn't have happened. What this tells us is that they probably talked about this a lot over the last 4 days, but also that they believed in Jesus so much that if he'd been there, this never would have happened. Their brother would not have died. But because he wasn't there, Jesus was unable to heal him. They had the faith that he would be healed from sickness, but not that he could be resurrected. Both miraculous things, but the sisters believed for one thing and not the other. And it just makes me think, how much is our faith limited? How much is our expectation limited? We can believe Jesus for one thing, but not believe him for something else. Where is your faith limited today? Where can you believe Jesus for more? Where can you take off the expectations that you put upon him, that limit him? Because you've got to look into the face of Jesus, just as Mary and Martha did, and know that when you're with Jesus, that nothing is impossible. We see in these verses that Jesus weeps. We see that Mary and Martha and the Jews around them are weeping in a way that means wailing. There's this huge commotion and pouring out of sadness and despair. And Jesus responds to it. We read in the scriptures that it says he's deeply moved and that he weeps. But why weep when you know that you're about to resurrect this man? Does this verse make any sense to us? But Jesus has deep empathy with what Mary and Martha had been through. He feels their pain. He feels the mourning and the despair of the people. And instead of being indifferent towards it, we see this compassion within him that weeps with them. That's our Savior. That's who Jesus is. He mourns with us. Jesus was deeply moved. The Greek that John writes with there actually means that he was angry. It's almost like he snorted or he groaned at the situation. This is not a word that we'd associate with Jesus in this moment, to think that Jesus was angry. And I think it changes our perception of how God feels towards death. Because I think that sometimes we think of God in heaven looking down on earth as a passive onlooker rather than being actively and emotionally engaged. Maybe he's sad for us, or maybe that he feels our emotion in the moment. But the truth is that death makes God angry, because it was never the intention of God to have death on this earth. He placed Adam and Eve here for eternity, to live forever. It was only when sin came into the world and it fell that death came into the world. And that's why when Jesus is faced with death right before him, of the friend that he loves, it angered him, because it was never his plan for this earth. Christ has not come to the tomb as a spectator, but like a wrestler, preparing for the contest. Therefore, no wonder that he groans again, for the violent tyranny of death which he had to overcome stands before his eyes. So Jesus finally arrives at the cave, and he's there looking onto the tomb, ready to take on death, to contend with death that stole his friend that he loves. And Jesus, knowing that he's been given authority on all things, over all things in the earth, knows that death has to be conquered. But the thing is, Jesus knows that when he calls Lazarus out from his tomb, when he resurrects him, it's going to set a chain of events in motion that are going to lead to his death. There's no turning back from this point. Even to come to the tomb was to risk his life, but to resurrect Lazarus, it was certain that the Pharisees would be after his life, that they would make plans to kill him. Jesus knew this. We see this in John 12, where they come together because of all the excitement about this resurrection of Lazarus. They begin to plot the death of Jesus. So Jesus knows, and he takes this moment before the cave, knowing that as he gives this instruction for Lazarus to come out of the cave, that he's going to be swapping his life for Lazarus's. That this instruction to resurrect Lazarus is going to come at the price of death. Jesus, about to perform this miracle, looking upon this tomb carved out of rock, knowing that it's his body in just a matter of days that will be lay overcome by death inside a cold stone tomb, just as Lazarus's was. But in that moment, Jesus chooses the life of Lazarus over his own. But as Jesus made the instruction to take away the stone, Mary and Martha still didn't yet understand what he was trying to do. They still didn't understand the miracle that they were about to see. Maybe they thought that Jesus wanted to have the stone rolled away so that he could see his friend that he loved one more time in the flesh to say goodbye. So they tried to talk him out of it. There's going to be a stench. There's going to be an odor. Let's not open the tomb. But Jesus insists, roll away the stone. As they rolled away the stone, Jesus prays a simple prayer so that all the people, all the crowd that are gathered there could hear him and know that this was with God's power and help that he was going to do this miracle. And then, in a loud voice, so that everybody could hear clearly, Jesus stands before the tomb and says, "Lazarus, come out." A jaw-dropping miracle, the dead man raised. I think of Lazarus finding himself in the tomb alone in the coldness of the cave, breath returning to his lungs, heart beating once more, hearing not only the voice of his Savior, but his friend. Blood starting to flow around the body again, his hands and feet tied, not being able to see because of his face covering. He would have had to shuffle himself out of his own grave. He had to respond to the voice of Jesus before he could see where he was going. I pray that you today would stop trying to figure your entire pathway and follow the voice of Jesus. Even if you have to hop there, even if you have to crawl, do whatever it takes to come towards his voice, just as Lazarus did. Church, we need to come out of our cave, come out of our grave, out of our paralysis, out of our restrictions, because there is so much fullness of life that God has for each one of us. And he's called us to be the salt of the earth, to be the light of this world, to be the hope that people look to. But how can we do that if we're still in our cave, if we're still in our restriction? We need to break out and come to the life that Jesus has for us. And as Lazarus came out and Jesus saw him coming out of the cave, Jesus said to the attendants, "Take off his grave clothes." Church, we need to take off the grave clothes that we've started to wear in this season, that's changed our perspective, that's made us cynical, where we've spent more time consuming news than consuming his word, more time scrolling on Instagram than spending time on our knees in prayer. Because church, these things, this season, it can affect us. It can make us cynical. It can make us negative. It can give us words of death in our mouths. But Jesus is saying to you today, take off the grave clothes. Start to see with new sight. Look to me and come towards my voice and into the freedom and fullness of life that I have for you. I believe that Jesus is going to do an amazing thing through the cave this year, because Jesus does a resurrection in the cave. That's where he brings new life. That's where he comes and changes the game. And that's what he's going to do at the cave this year. He's going to come and bring resurrection in your life. So I want to encourage you. Do you believe this? Are you ready to take off the grave clothes? Are you ready to come and embrace the fullness of life that Jesus has for you and our church? Let's do this together. Let's go to the cave in expectation and anticipation, full of faith for what Jesus is going to do.
He's here and he's moving. Oh, he longs to speak to us. Oh, he's here and he's moving. Would you open up your heart? Oh, he's here and he's moving. Oh, he longs to speak to us. Oh, he's here and he's moving.